Hello and welcome to what I believe is episode 13, season 2, episode 13, Ecuador Insider Podcast. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. We much appreciate you being here. Ryan is still on vacation in Panama. I've seen the photos coming in. It's beautiful, Caribbean water. We don't have that here in Ecuador. We don't have the turquoise water and white sand beaches. A little bit up north in Esmeraldas, but not too much. So the photos look beautiful. I hope Ryan's having a great time. He'll be back next week. Joined by Carl Marsan, I'm Jesse Bayer. Again, thanks for tuning in. We kind of did this episode already a while back, but we want to give you guys some more color on some of the other towns, cities, areas, etc. in our region. Obviously, Carl and Ryan live in Vilcabamba. I live close to Vilcabamba. It's a place that we talk about a lot. They're in a lot of our vlogs. It's obviously a great place to live and to very attractive place, and a lot of people come to Ecuador really specifically for Vilcabamba, and that's wonderful. That being said, there's also people who want to be a little further out, want sort of not that of course there's tons of locals in Vilcabamba, but maybe a more traditional Ecuadorian feel, or maybe they want to get really rural, or maybe they're interested in the Amazonian region. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these areas, give a little color to life and the feel and the climate and the perks and pluses and minuses, basically of some of these areas that we work in that are within a few hours of Loja or of Vilcabamba. Let's start with Loja. And Loja is a place where Carl knows well. It's a place I lived for 5-6 years. So we used to have our offices in Loja. I used to live in Loja. My daughter went to a number of, two or three different schools in Loja over the years. And, it's a place I know well. It's a place that's changed a lot. But let's back up. I'll get into that. Let's back up. So Loja is, in my opinion, if you're going to live in a city, and Loja is a city, so about 250,000 people. If you're going to live in a city in Ecuador, for my money, it's the best by far. And the reason I say that is not necessarily because it's the most fun or because it's the most beautiful or aesthetically appealing. Not necessarily those things. It's because just the lifestyle. It's very, very safe city. It's a place where the kind of old school Ecuadorian culture is very much intact. So people are very polite. The pace is very slow for a 250,000 person city. Everybody knows each other. It's very familial. The culture here in general is like that, but Loja it's actually, for me, it's mind blowing, right? Like when I used to be involved in sales all the time, I would have a family from Loja who are the buyers, and then we would be talking to a family from Loja who are sellers. And there's basically no such thing as them not either knowing each other or having some amount of connection where they identify each other. Oh, your sister went to school with my sister, and this, her brother-in-law is my, brother's friend. There's just, you can't get away from that. So it's really a city. It's really a city that operates like a town. So it's very livable. It's a very livable city. It's not LA, right, or New York, or some of these places that have all the tons of hassles and tons of stress and all that stuff that kind of comes with city life. Loja doesn't really have that. Now, it has changed a lot over the years. So it has more of that now than it did when I got here. When I got here in 2013, very few traffic lights, very few police. You could kind of park anywhere. There was almost no traffic problems. That's not the case anymore. A lot of that stuff has now come. There's still very little traffic, but you can sit in traffic from time to time now. Whereas before that would have never happened. So, so let's just talk a little bit about some of the generalities. So Loja is in a valley. It's again a 250,000 person city in a valley. It's expanding, so it's definitely grown a lot in the 8.5 years that I've been here. It's a cool climate for Ecuador, so definitely not cold at all, but it's about 6,500, 7,000 feet, depending on where you are in the city. I don't know what that is in meters. Any idea?
6,000 feet?
Yeah, 6,500, 7,000.
About 1,700 meters?
About 1,700 meters. That sounds about right. Yep. and it's surrounded by just absolutely gorgeous mountains. So you have, these beautiful green, Andean mountains. We're in the Andes here in Southern Ecuador. And then you are nestled right up against the Orient, against the Amazonian region. So, you drive over the mountain to Zamora, and long before you get to Zamora, you're in the Amazonian region. You're in what they call the Orient, el Oriente. Totally different climate. That's we'll get into that. One of the perks of Loja is that all of the weather and the air come out of the Orient, come out of essentially Zamora. So you've got, thousands of miles or kilometers or whatever of, Amazonian air, that's just coming over from the east into the valley. So you have, amazing air quality. There can be some buses and some things like right in the city that damage that a little bit, but it's not a city that's polluted or anything like that. So you have amazing air quality, you have water everywhere, nature everywhere. You're right up against Podocarpus as well, the massive national park. So you can do all that sort of nature stuff is very readily available. There's botanical gardens. There's a zoo. I don't know how nice the zoo is.
It's good.
You've been there.
I mean, it's all right. There's a lion, a couple lions, some giraffes.
I heard the giraffe died again.
Oh, really?
There
were 2 giraffes last time I was there.
They were there, yeah. Because there was, anyway, that's a whole nother story. But so yeah, again, right? People in Loja are very, very polite, right? So you're gonna get buenos dias, buenas tardes, buenas noches, buen provecho when you walk by somebody who's eating or somebody walks by you, I should say, that's eating. It's pretty trusting. Like I was amazed, being in a city where people didn't necessarily know me, right? Some people did, but you walk into a store, you're buying something, you don't have enough money, or they don't have change or something, and don't worry about it. Come back, just come back. In a city and you don't know me, wow, that's really cool. All right, I think I've done it. What do you obviously you haven't lived there, but you spend a ton of time there. It's the city in our region, so it's 45 minutes from Vilcabamba where Carl lives. And so you go to Loja, everyone goes to Loja essentially from time to time. Some people might only go once a month or something just to do a big shopping or whatever. Some people might just go to, buy furniture, big things like that. But for most people, they're going in once a week, twice a week, once every couple of weeks at least. So it's a place Carl's in all the time and knows a lot about. So what are your thoughts on Loja?
Yeah, like you said, I've never lived there, so I don't know what it's like to actually, live there. But the contrast that I like is, Vilcabamba is a small town. Things are slow. Sometimes the central park is empty. There might be 5 people. You go to Loja, there's a bit more of that busyness of the city, which is kind of fun. It's entertaining. It's interactive. So I enjoy going to Loja. I used to not like it for some reason, and I think especially because when you do a lot of governmental, going to, trying to get paperwork done and stuff like that, you kind of resent going to Loja because that's what you do there a lot of times. But actually I've really, it grew on me. I really actually enjoy going to Loja, meeting people. I think the city has gotten a lot more beautiful. The Central Park's beautiful, nice big cathedral. There's beautiful, good restaurants, actually pretty good restaurants, like high quality, luxury level restaurants, which is enjoyable. There's a movie theater if you're into that. There's some nice parks. My son loves biking. We go to Parque Hipiro, go for a bike ride around there.
That's a great park.
It's a nice park for kids, yeah. There's
it's huge.
Paddle boats.
That's
tried those?
Yeah, my daughter, when she was younger, that was she loved that. Yeah. You can feed the swans or the ducks or whatever they have and paddle around in the boats. And there's big sport. It's a nice park.
I wonder if sometimes maybe we picked the wrong boat because some of those boats are just you just don't work very well.
Spin.
But no, that's cool. There's a skate park, basketball. We actually played basketballs out there. Sure. Basketball games. There's a nice big swimming pool out there as well.
Freezing, but
interesting. Yeah. So there's that. For shopping, definitely Super Maxi. You'll hear about that. You'll see it on the map. It's like the big grocery store where you can get all of your imported things, that are not necessarily available in Vilcabamba, for example. Also, the hardware stores are way better if you're going to buy things to build your house, building materials, but also tiles and all the different home.
And it's all a little bit cheaper in Loja too. So because they bring it out to Vilca, there's an extra little cost built in.
Yeah. So I like that a lot. Yeah, it's true. People are very polite. You know, there's that cultural thing there. There's something else I wanted to say. Yeah, they tend to, maybe they don't have as much of a bias with foreigners that they do here in Vilcabamba in a way. I think sometimes we get treated well in Loja because we're foreigners. It's like
I agree.
That's kind of nice as well.
That's, by the way, let me interrupt you for half a second. That's, by the way, an advantage being a foreigner in Ecuador. You get treated a little better, just in general, I think, than there's disadvantages too, right? People might try to jack up prices from time to time and things like that, but you have a really large advantage as a foreigner here of just sort of, there's an expectation that you're honest and you're on time and and you know, you're someone to be taken seriously, basically. And so we get treated a little better, I think, than the average person, and you know, that's a perk.
Yeah, definitely. You know, foreigners have the reputation for being honest. You know, that they keep their words, which, you know, maybe local people don't necessarily always do that. We can't generalize, but it's actually good. What else? Yeah, Loja's actually a beautiful city. The weather is not bad. It's a little cooler than Vilcabamba, but it's comfortable in my opinion. Like, it's not cold by any means, but it's a little cooler, which is nice and fresh. Nice fresh breeze coming through the valley. Yeah, Loja's expanded. I was going to say there's a big open market that I used to love to go to with a friend. With a pickup truck, we'd fill, you know, the back of the truck.
Which one did you go to? The San Sebastian?
Las
Pizzas. Which one is that one?
Past the bus station at the end of town.
Oh, that one that's way north, out north. Yeah. I used to do my shopping at the one in San Sebastian on Sundays, I think it was.
Right.
But these open air markets are incredible, right? These massive, you know, open air spaces, usually on the street, and with, you know, maybe 1,000 vendors or something. I don't know how big that one is that you're talking about, but the one I used to go to, you know, probably 1,000 vendors selling every variety of, you know, fruit and vegetable and even meat and everything that you could imagine. Even processed products like, you know, panela or mani, or, you know, like the peanuts with sometimes just peanuts, but also the peanuts that have all sorts of different varieties where they sweeten them with different sugarcane products and so forth. But yeah, beautiful open air markets on the weekends, and then there may even be one. I'm not sure. Probably the one by La Mayorista is, I think, 7 days a week. But the big ones are usually one day a week.
Yeah, the Las Pitas is also all week, and it's actually where the trucks come and bring I think it's the biggest one.
Oh, is that like the wholesale one that I was hearing about?
There's a whole truck of watermelon and a whole truck of mangoes and a whole truck of pineapple.
Sure.
You know, and then they put stuff on the street, and you get really good deals. Actually, that's where you can get your stuff. If you're gonna buy in bulk, you go there and you fill up your car. So that was cool. I always enjoyed that.
Yeah, and let's get into the weather a little bit. So within an hour of where we are, basically, or let's just say of Loja, there's pretty much any climate you're looking for, you know, other than, you know, a ski town, right? Other than winter. So Vilcabamba for me is not quite hot enough, but I'm crazy. I like heat. I like real heat. For some people, Vilcabamba is really too hot. Like I've seen people come from Scotland or, you know, or Northern Europe or different places, and they're sweltering in 78 degrees or 82 degrees or whatever it is. With sun, you know, the sun can be strong. Loja's about 10 degrees cooler a lot of the time. So Loja, especially at night, but look, your daytime highs sometimes can be somewhat similar, but it never gets hot in Loja. It never gets truly hot. It gets quite warm and very nice. Consistently, right? So your daytime highs are consistently 60s and 70s, and more often 70s. But you're almost never hitting 80. You're certainly not getting to 82, 85, anything like that. So it's cooler, and then especially at night, you know, you're often in the 50s at night. You're occasionally in the 40s at night, low 60s. You know, that sort of nighttime temperature. Sorry, I can't help you with what that is in Celsius. And I don't know how we were laughing. I'm not sure Carl's any better even with that. But you know, it's cooler. So Vilcabamba is also not hot, right? We're not in the upper 80s and 90s or anything like that in Vilcabamba. For most people, it's kind of an ideal climate. But for folks who are looking for like a little bit cooler, just, you know, never feeling really that hot, sort of sweating type feel, Loja's better for that. Another thing I wanted to mention, you know, Loja is considered like the arts and culture capital of Ecuador, so it's a place that is into that stuff, right? Art and dance and theater and concerts and all that sort of stuff. There's a decent little nightlife. Not one I really never participated in too much, but it exists. There's some good restaurants. They did a big, what they called like a regeneration project that ended 4 or 5 years back. And so the center, and then when I say the center, it's a good chunk of the city, is now much nicer. All the power lines are buried, and you've got nice sidewalks and nice streets and bike lanes. The other big change since I've been here in Loja is we didn't have very many sort of trendy, sort of boutique type stores in 2013 when I got here. Now they're all over the city. Right now there's tons of them. New ones open all the time. Beautiful looking restaurants, clothing shops, pet salons, like this, that kind of like trendy stuff. We didn't have any of that before. Now we do. We've also seen the mountains around Loja really develop a lot. So if you're looking at Loja from an investment standpoint, it's really interesting too. There's not a whole lot more space for the city to grow. There's some out north still. There's still some in the mountains, and there's basically 2 other valleys outside of that that have yet to be really developed. But it's clearly that's happening. Land prices have reflected that. Not necessarily construction prices, but land prices. The city's definitely expanding. So it's if you have capital and you wanna invest in a city, wow, there's some really interesting pieces of land that are undeveloped still, but are will soon be city. Will soon be eaten up by the city. So there's some really interesting opportunities there. What else? I don't know. I think anything else?
You said that it was the arts capital of Ecuador or something like that. They call it the music capital, I believe. What I was told by some locals is if you've studied in Loja, usually you know how to play an instrument. Like they learn piano, violin, all sorts of different musical instruments. A guitar. There's guitar makers, what they call luthier. There's guitar shops where they make actual guitars in Loja, and there's a nice orchestra, right?
Yeah, the Orquestra Sinfónica, right? I've gone to see them. They're amazing.
Very, very good. Yeah, and I think it's like free or like $1.
The one I went to was free.
Yeah, and it's like and not that many people go to it. It's actually kind of cool.
But it was so sad. The one I went, it's a free concert and it's world class.
Right.
Like it's amazing. And I walk into this free concert in a 250,000 person city, world class. It's half empty,
right?
and it's not, it was a decent sized auditorium, but it wasn't a massive concert hall. That was years ago. I don't know what it's like now.
But people, there used to be groups. They would like rent a van, and like people.
Oh, from Vilcabamba, right? Yeah, that's right.
And go to the orchestra. So that's cool. Also, the movie theater, just to put it out there, it's usually in Spanish. But if you rent the place, we've had groups, I didn't actually go, but like people have organized like a Star Wars movie or something, and they will actually play it in English if enough people, rent the room. So,
and that's one of the cool things about this culture in general. There's not really rules, right? You can always talk to people and work stuff out. That's so cool. I mean, can you imagine, going to a movie theater in the U.S. and being like, hey, I got 40 guys who would love to see this movie in Chinese. Like, could you do that? You wouldn't even, you'd get laughed at. But here you can work stuff like that out. And, that's one of the things I love about this culture. It's human. It's a very human culture. It hasn't lost that humanity to date. So that's I think that probably covers it. There is there is an airport, Loja Airport. It's in Katamayo, about 45 minutes outside the city. At some point, apparently, they're going to blast a tunnel through the mountain and make that trip maybe about half of that, so maybe about 20-25 minutes.
Oh, cool.
We'll see if that ever actually happens. But usually, the things they say they're going to do, they do. Take some time, but usually it does happen. So I do expect that to happen at some point. But
yeah, well. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I never did it. But there's actually paragliding in Loja.
Is there?
Heard about this?
That's cool.
People, jump off the mountains. So I thought that's pretty unique about the area. I don't know if they do that in other places, but that's here.
Totally, and the other thing that jumps out to the biodiversity of Loja is exceptional. I think it's one of the I've heard reports or different things. It's one of the most biodiverse regions on the planet. Partly, I think, because you have, and I'm not an expert in this at all, so forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, but I think partly it's because you have so many different climates in such a tight area that you have, you have all the flora and fauna and animals and all, all the wildlife from those climates, all in a very, close proximity to one another. Just to give you an example of that, out on a property that I own in Loja, a big finca, we have the wildlife of the Orient, of the Amazonian region. So we have parrots and monkeys at 7,000 feet. That would normally not be the case, right? It's kind of cool. It's not tropical. It's not the climate for parrots and monkeys. But because it connects to the Orient, this is on the east side of the city that connects to the Amazonian region, those animals just come across. And one day I'm walking and I see a flock. I didn't even know they flocked, but I saw about 7, 8 beautiful green and red and black, probably had some other colors in there too, parrots singing, making the most beautiful sounds in Loja. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, the Podocarpus National Park is a preserved natural forest. Loja, it borders Loja, the whole city of Loja. It actually comes down to Vilcabamba and all the way down to Zumba, to Peru.
It's huge.
It's huge. One of the main entrances that people go hiking to, it's actually just outside of Loja. So in Kakanuma, you go up to the cabins up there and you can go on the trails, and there's actually very unique fauna and flora like you're talking about. You can see Loja if you're on a day that's not cloudy. You can actually see the city of Loja from up there. It's beautiful. And right there outside of Loja. It's pretty cool.
And there's all sorts of, sort of mythical stuff as well, all over Ecuador. But, like you can go up into these lagoons, for example, in Podocarpus. That I haven't done. I've been to other lagoons, but you can go up to these lagoons. You can go with a shaman. They'll go in the water. They'll tell you all kinds of interesting stories, and they'll clean your energy and your aura, and who knows, and do all kinds of stuff. But there's all kinds of cool stuff like that. And really, as far as the nature experiences, it's as good as it gets. Surrounding, and that's the interesting thing too, right? Like in the States, usually when you have a city, it's like you have city, suburbs, towns, then you get really rural. Whereas here it's like valley, city, rural. There's no suburbs, there's no in between. So you're either in the city or you're in nature. That's really cool because in New York City where I lived for many years, it's like if you want to get into nature, you really got to drive. You really have to go upstate, or you have to go far into New Jersey, or you have to go way into Long Island somewhere. Whereas here, you're like 5 minutes or less from nature in any direction. So that's kind of an interesting characteristic. There's no sprawl, there's no suburbs. Partly just because we're in the mountains, so it's like you build in the valleys on the flat land. But that's a nice characteristic.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so we've covered Vilcabamba obviously in a lot of shows. We won't probably touch on that too much today. Pretty much any video of ours you watch, you can learn and hear about Vilcabamba. But let's talk a little bit about some of the other areas. So let's start west. So if you picture Ecuador, west is the coast, right? East is the Amazonian region, and then eventually other countries, and then right all the way through. So if we go west, we go out towards Katamayo. Katamayo is where the airport is. It's an interesting area in the sense that there's a lot of economic activity. The location is interesting. It's growing a lot. It's not beautiful, in my opinion. It's kind of a desert-like climate. It's not dangerous, but it's not as safe as Loja and Vilcabamba and these other areas. It can be quite hot and dry. Again, I like the climate out there, the heat, but it can be quite hot, and it's not a beautiful city. It is where the airport is. It is interesting from an investment standpoint because again, it's really strategically located. Because as you keep going, like basically, if you're coming from Peru through the Cariamanga-Gonzanama road, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You're going to hit Katamayo. If you're coming from the coast, you're also going to hit Katamayo. So it's kind of the hub between Loja and then the rest of those regions. So it's interesting for that reason. It's also, if you have asthma or you have certain health conditions where you're looking for like a Phoenix type climate, that sort of dry, warmer climate, There's areas out in the Katamayo region that are great for that people have had really good success for certain health conditions. Okay, and it also has the airport. Do you want to talk about Katamayo at all?
I was just gonna say, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's there's a lot of people from Loja that have second homes in Katamayo,
Yeah,
kind of like
sure.
a Vilcabamba, Malacatos type, but in a different area. It seems like it attracts. So it's the city's not beautiful, but the mountains are beautiful.
Yeah.
There's nice. It's actually nice, I think, out there to go visit once in a while.
Yeah, and they have a water park that's fun to bring the family. We've done that a couple of times. Massive sugarcane fields. It's basically the whole valley that's not city is sugarcane. There's a big company, I forget the name of it, this huge company, sugarcane company out there. I don't know if it's the largest in Ecuador, but it certainly may be. And the airport. So it's a place you're gonna go from time to time probably, regardless if you live in the region. There's also a back road from the airport to Vilcabamba, Malacatos, so you don't have to go through Loja. The airport from Malacatos is only an hour, an extra 15 minutes or so to Vilcabamba. Is that all right? Hour 20, hour quarter to Vilcabamba?
Yeah, maybe even a little less.
A little less, yeah. Then from Katamayo, and we're probably not going to take the time to put the map up on this podcast, but you can look up these names. Katamayo, Catamayo, Ayo, Catamayo. From there, is that right? Yeah. It's a mouthful. So then there's basically, from Katamayo, there's kind of two options, right? You can make a left, basically, and go towards the Gonzanama, which I'll talk about in a second, Cariamanga Road, which then eventually hits Peru, or you can go right, and that road goes through some really interesting towns as well. Caracocha. I did it. I didn't confuse it with Cotacacha. Caracocha, Olmedo, a whole bunch of towns out there. Those are interesting areas. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then eventually you hit the coast. So you hit sort of towards Machala and that region on the coast, the southern coast. So let's start with the road towards Gonzanama. That's an interesting area to me. It's an area I like. Gonzanama is very sparsely populated. It's very green. It does have a dry season, so there's a few months where it browns out a little bit, but in general it's very green, has a pretty good amount of water. Land is still pretty reasonable. The value of land is completely dependent on cattle out there. So it's an area that's famous in Ecuador for the quality of their cheese, because of the quality of their milk, because of the quality of the grass. So it's an area that is really predominantly, almost entirely used for grazing cattle. It's very rural. The climate is warmer than Loja, but cooler, significantly cooler than Vilcabamba. So it's a comfortable climate for sure. It never gets super crazy hot. Definitely never gets very cold. Can certainly get cool, but it's never going to get cold. And it's very much sort of undeveloped or unsomething Ecuador, right? There's not a lot of foreigners, hardly any. There's not a whole lot of business. There's no industry whatsoever. It's cattle, right? It's a town, Gonzanama, which is a decent sized town, very very slow paced, low key, polite, quiet, Andean Ecuadorian town, surrounded by these beautiful green mountains and cattle, essentially. So if you're wanting to do any sort of hacienda, right? Like you want to produce crops, or you want to get in the cattle business, or you just want a big family homestead. It's a great place. It's a great place to do it. There's a back road also from Gonzanama to Malacatos that takes about an hour. So you actually can get pretty quickly from Gonzanama to Malacatos, and then Vilcabamba if you want to, if you're trying to head to Vilcabamba. So, it's not a short trip. It's an hour or so about an hour to Malacatos. Beautiful drive through these very high mountains. Have you ever done that drive?
No, is it through Purunuma?
Purunuma, exactly.
Okay. I've been to Purunuma, but I didn't know.
Well, okay, so you've seen the majority of that. Yeah, I mean, Purunuma's probably 2/3 of the way.
Okay.
And then you go down the backside, and it's a very different view, because from the front side it's like the Malacatos Valley, and you can actually see the windmills in Loja from Porto Numa, in those areas. But it can be that sort of a more dry area, kind of red rock sort of area, which is a beautiful area. We actually have a project out there. But then when you go when you hit the other side and you go down the other side, it's green. It's green, grassland, cattle, and then you get into Gonzanama. And then you can keep going on that road to Cariamanga, somewhat similar to Gonzanama. And there's interesting areas out there. So again, if you want cattle business, it's phenomenal. If you're just looking for that sort of climate and like a low-key, peaceful, rural lifestyle, it's great for that. There's a lot of crops that do really well in that sort of climate as well if you're wanting to get into different agricultural businesses, and still maintain reasonable distance to Katamayo where the airport is, Loja where the city is, and then Vilcabamba where there's a nice farm community, etc. I know that's not an area you know super well, but do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I've been there a couple of times. It was beautiful to me when I was there. It seems to me like an area that could become a kind of Vilcabamba eventually. I agree. I think there's a lot of this homesteading. There's a few foreigners that live out there. We know a couple. I know actually a Russian guy who bought out there with his wife as well. And I was going to say, have you gone to the big fair that they have there? They sell like animals, cattle.
No, I know about it. I haven't been to it. Yeah.
Apparently that's a good thing to see when you go down there. And like you said, they make a lot of cheeses. Yeah, I went there once with a group of people. We rented like a hosteria. Some people were camping. It was really beautiful. Super quiet nights. The sky was full of stars. It was nice out there.
Sounds nice. And that actually brings me to something I want to mention. So, if you go to an area like Gonzanama, for example, right, where there's a handful of foreigners out there, but not, essentially none, you're definitely get treated a little differently than you would like in Vilcabamba, right? Vilcabamba is a place where foreigners are very common. Locals are totally used to interacting with foreigners. So it's either you're getting interacted with just as sort of par for the course, no big deal. Hey, how's it most of the population of Vilcabamba, or this is probably 10% or less, but it's like they're trying to take advantage of you, or they're trying to charge you a little more, or they're just kind of a little it's just a different vibe. It's a different thing. And again, no animosity at all between foreigners and locals in Vilcabamba whatsoever. It's a place that is absolutely thriving, for everybody. But when you go to those very rural places, you just get treated like an Ecuadorian. So it's a different experience. It's a much more like sort of those traditional niceties and all that politeness and all that sort of stuff is very much intact. Okay. In those kinds of areas where there's less people, there's smaller areas that are less developed, and then they're not used to necessarily interacting with foreigners all the time. So there isn't that sort of preconceived notions or things like that. So it's just a little different experience. So that kind of covers that road. Then if we go on the other road, so this is a road that goes to Machala. So if you want to look up on Google from Katamayo to Machala, right? I'm talking about that road. That's interesting too. So you go out to like San Pedro de la Bendita, if I'm saying that right. Very dry, warm area. Again, has lots of interesting properties for health. It gets a little bit more, it almost feels like Arizona type a little bit. And then as you keep going, land gets cheap too. As you get into like Olmedo and Caracocha, Caracocha, and all those areas, land is cheap, pretty cheap still out there. And then eventually you get towards the coast, where you're actually on the coast, but you're still in the mountains. So you have the climate of the coast, it's considered the coast, but you haven't dipped down yet to like sea level. So you places like Piñas and those areas, interesting. It's hot, it's tropical, but you're up. There's a lot of places on that road where you're far from the water, but you can see it. You have you're up high and you have a view out where you can actually see the ocean. Great for agriculture. A lot of these areas, it's hot, so a lot of these areas are very hot. So you're in the 80s. So if you're wanting to do mangoes, or if you're wanting to do things that, like the heat, there's some really great areas for that. Have you traveled much out there?
No, I mean, I've taken the bus once between Loja and the coast, we went that route, but I don't know the area.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we don't have a ton for sale down that road. I think we will probably in the future, but it's an interesting area. Okay, let's touch now. So we went west just now, right? We went from Vilcabamba south, Loja a little bit north, and went out west, Katamayo, and then split out towards the coast. So let's talk a little bit now about east, and then we'll go south, and hopefully wrap up here at some point. I feel like I've been talking a lot. So we go east from Loja, we get into Zamora. Zamora is a place Carl knows very well, I know very well. Well, why don't you start? What do you think about Zamora?
Yeah, main thing I would say, actually I'm surprised of how much life is in the city of Zamora. There's like a malecon, which is like on the river, boardwalk, nightlife. There seems to be a lot of restaurants, discotecas, bars actually. I was surprised to notice that. But the main thing for me is the wildlife, the nature, lots of waterfalls. I made a vlog about it. I call it the Land of Waterfalls, but I was surprised at how many super cool waterfalls like on various properties were there. The wildlife, the flora and fauna is pretty diverse, very green. It rains a little bit more. That's the main thing for me that I really enjoy about it is like, the Podocarpus National Park, the birds, you can see the butterflies, there's tons of those, and you can go visit some waterfalls and stuff like that. Other than that, I like the fruits. There's a lot of fruits coming from there. Every time I go down to Zamora, I'll get some plantains, I'll get some cacao pods if they have them available or something, just because it grows well there. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, one thing I forgot to mention too about on that west trip, eventually on the road that goes towards I gotta use a different example. The road that goes towards Olmedo and that whole area, you eventually get to Zapotillo, which is also really interesting. They also sell a lot of cattle and have those sort of fairs and things there. For a lot of them are brought in from Peru because that's very close to the border. But that's a really interesting area as well. But getting back to Zamora, so once we're into Zamora, we're in the Amazonian region. We're in the Orient, right? So humidity. If you don't like humidity, Zamora is not for you. I wish I could tell you otherwise because it's such a beautiful place. But if you don't like humidity, it's humid. It is what it is. It's humid. It rains a good amount. It's not an oppressive amount of rain, in my opinion. The lushness of the nature is incredible. There's just, there's no such thing as a water shortage. There's lots of situations where you're needing to manage the water because there's so much of it. So the water, the pristine, the wildlife, the quality of the air, the quality of the water. You've got the national park there. You've got millions of acres or hectares of Amazon, that you're in. Wildlife. There's a lot of bird watching that goes on there. There are snakes, that's an area where you do have to keep an eye out for snakes. There are spiders. There's things like that. So it's not. If you're the type of person, no snakes, no spiders, no humidity, right? You're like, it's not for you. But if you want that sort of Amazonian adventure type feel, it's great. And people are really great, I think too. I really like the people out in that region. Very down to earth, hardworking, pretty honest people, in my opinion. It's nice that way. It does have a city. It's a town, but they call it a city, Zamora, which is, like you said, it has a lot, right? It has all the banks and all the groceries. It has everything you need. You're still pretty close to Loja, so you're only an hour from Loja, in the town in Zamora. You immediately can get further than that, of course. And Zamora is also a province, so when we talk about Zamora, we're not just talking about the city, we're talking about like that region, that area, lots of little towns, bazillion little towns, and lots of microclimates too. So you can go up in elevation, get cooler, go down and get warmer. There's even pockets that are not as humid. It's an interesting area for agriculture. It doesn't have the best soil in Ecuador, but there's areas that have great soil. It's very conducive to lots of crops. Most people do cattle out there as well, but some people do other things like cacao and coffee and other things. I don't know what else. Anything else about Zamora? It's peaceful. It's relaxed. People slow paced. I mean, people go to the river and swim in the river and do all that stuff. It's known for tilapia, so people, on the weekends, people will go have some fried fish and go to the river and do all that kind of stuff. I mean, Ecuador in general it's a simple place. People are pretty simple, pretty down to earth, not very pretentious. People are not full of airs and pretense and kind of weirdness.
Right.
You can talk to people very straight and direct, and that's fine. People are kind. They'll help you. And all these areas we're talking about are like that, but Zamora maybe a little more so, in my opinion, than some of these areas we're talking about. Good.
Well, one thing, I'm curious if you have a lot of knowledge about this, but there is some gold mining around Zamora area. That's kind of I think the town looks the way it looks, and some of the other towns a little further north, I think because of the gold money,
Makes
the
sense.
taxes and everything.
Makes
It's
sense.
like, it seems kind of developed, the parks are nice, the playgrounds for the kids are kind of nice and beautiful, and you can tell there's been good investment in those things. So yeah, there's some gold mining around that general area of Zamora. Not as much down south in the Orient, right? There's a lot more in that. You know much about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a controversial subject, right? There is gold mining that goes on in the Orient. They did pass a whole bunch of environmental laws some years back, so theoretically, they're doing it in some sort of environmentally semi-friendly way. I don't know too much about it, but there certainly has been some contamination, not in a not in a widespread way, but it's like in areas where they're mining, which are not a lot, but they're large. So it's like a company will buy up a big tract, get a mining concession, and mine that area. Generally speaking, it's not near where people live, but obviously you wouldn't want to be necessarily downstream from that or that type of thing. So there is mining that goes on out there, but certainly you don't have to experience that if at all if you don't want to. I mean, I've been there many times. I don't think I've ever seen a mine, but they exist and they're large. There's Chinese mines and Canadian mines. Yeah. So then let's talk, Carl, about, and you'll have to take the lead on these. Let's talk a little bit about Valladolid, which is how far from Vilcabamba would you say?
An hour and 15.
Hour 15. And then, so if let me orient people. So we come back out of Zamora, head back west, hit Loja, go south, 45 minutes from Loja to Vilcabamba. 10 minutes prior to that, you hit Malacatos. Interesting areas. West of Malacatos is actually interesting too.
Right.
Cheap too, not super expensive. So between in fact, from an investment standpoint, I'm really interested in this area because it's one of the last areas in this region that's not super pricey. Like a lot of these areas we're talking about are cheap, but as soon as you get to like Loja, Vilcabamba, Malacatos, it's expensive. Maybe not expensive on a relative basis from where you're coming from, but for here. But that area starting in Vilcabamba, which actually has gotten a lot more expensive the last several years, but from Vilcabamba to Katamayo, right? That whole drive, which is about 50 minutes or so, it's pretty dry. There's not a ton of water, so you have to make sure you have water, but there is water. And it's one of the last areas within close proximity to Malacatos, Vilcabamba, that's not expensive. You can still find land out there, pretty inexpensive. There's lots of nice agricultural land. It's beautiful. It's a drier climate, so it's that sort of climate, but it's interesting. It's nice. Go ahead.
I've just noticed out there, in the area you're referring to, if you have water, it seems like the ground is really good for agriculture.
Totally. I agree.
The fruits, like the avocados are massive, and the mangoes and the different fruit trees that I've seen being grown there. I don't know what's with the soil. I made a vlog about it, and it's just this really good soil that's seen for fruit trees. And if you have water, if you don't have water, it's a desert. But if you have water, you can grow amazing stuff out there.
No, that's a great point, and it's hot enough that you can grow, coconuts and mangoes like you mentioned, and avocado grows great in that area. You can grow the warm weather stuff, which you can also grow in Vilcabamba, but not as well. It's a little cooler.
Exactly.
So then once we're in Vilcabamba, now we go south, right? And Ecuador is interesting. This part of Ecuador is interesting. If you want to go into Zamora, you got to go east. But other parts of the Orient, of the Amazonian region, you can access just by going south. So and those are different roads, right? One road goes west from Loja into Zamora, the other road goes south, hits Vilcabamba, and then continues south eventually to Peru. So the first town you hit is Valladolid. Higher in elevation, humid, lots of water, lots of nature. What's your thoughts on it? Valladolid?
Yeah, it's beautiful down there. I mean, I like it. I would say that for me, if I was to choose an oriental area, I would choose Valladolid because of its proximity to Vilcabamba. You're about an hour away. You can still be in Vilca relatively quickly, but you're in the Amazon. It's not as far as Zamora or Palanda or Zumba, and a little cooler because it's higher elevation than Palanda and Zumba. But it does rain a lot. That's actually just like most of these places in the Orient. I mean, every time I've gone there, it's usually rains, at least sometime during the day. Beautiful waterfalls, rivers, I mean, raging rivers, like amazing. You know, the feeling of like, the amount of water down there is pretty epic. And I made a vlog post about it with this palm tree reserve that had waterfalls and trails and stuff. Very cool. I mean, worth visiting if anything. You know, if you go down to Valladolid. They really pride themselves with their coffee and their cacao, kind of like Palanda as well. I think it's nice to visit. I would say because of its proximity to Vilcabamba, it seems like a good in-between because you can still get relatively cheap land down there. And very fertile. I mean, you don't need to irrigate. That's amazing. Like here in Vilcabamba, you don't need to irrigate. That doesn't exist. You have to water during the dry season. Down there, you just plant stuff and you don't have to water it ever because it rains enough, which is cool. Cattle farming is a big thing there as well.
And you brought up a point I want to touch on. So most of Ecuador experiences a dry season that can be shorter or longer depending on where you are, and then some areas do not have a dry season. So anytime we're talking about the Amazonian region, there's no dry season. Loja also does not have a dry season. It does have 2 or 3 months where it rains a little bit less, but it does not have a dry season. But most of these areas, all the other areas we're talking about, and most of Ecuador has a rainy and a dry season. In Vilcabamba, basically the rain starts around November and then ends around June. So that's kind of your rainy season, and then basically June through October to October. Obviously, it's a little different every year, but something like that is your dry season. We've talked about this a lot, but in this region, rainy season in general is considered the nicer time of year. It's not an oppressive amount of rain at all. It's a little bit warmer. Everything's green and lush and beautiful, and it's not windy. Dry season cools off ever so slightly. There's a month or two where it's pretty windy, can be pretty windy. Everything browns out. You're not getting the rain, so it's not as lush and beautiful. This year was spectacular dry season. It was the best that I've been here. And again, we're nitpicking. It's sort of like Floridians complaining when it's 68, and type of thing. But because the climate's amazing all year. So Palanda, and then we're about to talk about, Valladolid, and we're about to talk about Palanda and Zumba, and we talked about Zamora. No dry season. This is year-round rain. This is the Amazonian region, lush, green, tropical growth. Again, these towns like Valladolid that we're talking about now, these would be very much, very traditional in general places. Again, friendly people, polite, kind people. You're any of these places you're talking about, with the possible exception of Katamayo, you're very unlikely to be the victim of a crime. And they're very safe areas. Not that nothing ever happens. It's the world and there's humans, but these are safe areas. As Carl said, right? So you also have the humidity in Valladolid, similar to Zumba. You do have a lot of rain. It's the Amazon, so right, if you're into that experience, it's great. And the water, the rivers, the wildlife, all that stuff is the air. I mean, you breathe the air, it's like it fills you up with oxygen. Oh, I have a muscle thing in here. It fills you up with oxygen. It just feels you feel amazing in these places. I think it's partly just because of how much oxygen is in the air. Right. And like you said, it's a higher elevation, so it's a cool climate for the Amazonian region.
Yeah.
What are the differences between Valladolid and Palanda?
I think the main difference is the elevation. Palanda is a little lower altitude, so it's a little warmer. I think that's the main difference.
Palanda is the second one. That one, Palanda is a little do right? Is Valladolid smaller, or do I have that reversed?
I guess it's a bit bigger, probably a little bit bigger, Not significantly, but I think Palanda, there's the governmental head of that whole region, so there's more governmental offices.
The canton or the whatever.
Is it Canton Palanda or something? Which is interesting because Valladolid, Palanda, and Zumba are part of the Zamora Chinchipe province.
Right.
Even though it's kind of far from Zamora, you have to go through Vilcabamba, Loja, but it's still part of that province, interestingly enough. I was going to say something though about Valladolid, and same thing with Palanda. We have a good friend who's a raft guide, and he loves to go down in those areas.
Yeah.
Like he scouted a lot of the rivers down there. Probably one of the only person in the world really that's gone down rafting in those rivers. I mean, he's a pioneer, but he loves it down there. He says it's some of the best rafting in the world, actually.
Yeah, and this is a guy who, really cool guy, he grows mushrooms and does other stuff, but this is a guy who was a raft guide in the like Aspen, Colorado area, so he knows his stuff.
Right. There's a cool cave close to Valladolid. Have you been
Oh, really?
there?
No.
You have to hike to it, but you go in this cave and you can literally walk for like half an hour
Wow.
in this deep cavern. There's a river going through it, and you can't see, pitch black. When you turn off your lights, it's kind of surreal, actually. Kind of scary in a way. I went down there with my son when he was like 5 years old. We went on a motorcycle trip with a bunch of guys and hiked down to the caves. Pretty wild.
Dude, that sounds fun, man. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's go on a motorcycle trip. I just have to learn how to ride a motorcycle. That's cool. There's so much stuff like that here, right? It's like all those legends and those kinds of things. Like they're still alive and well here. All the sort of that's the other thing we didn't mention. Like in the Orient, there's a lot of indigenous. So if you get into Zamora and these kinds of places, you'll have a lot of indigenous communities, Shuar and others, who Ecuadorians are terrified of Shuar. They think they're going to curse them and shrink their heads.
They were the head shrinkers, the Shuars. That's what they actually did back in the days. I don't think they still do it, but they have their own laws, actually. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It's like
Well, the Sanaguros do as well. And
The Sanaguros do as well. So they won't go through the traditional justice system. They'll actually make their own, like, you get whipped a certain amount of times if you break the law. Seriously.
No, I know it is.
Yeah.
I'm not laughing because it's untrue. I'm laughing because it's funny. Yeah. That's interesting too. That gets into like the Aguadorean Constitution, which we've talked about, I think, on the last show a little bit. But I mean, there's these cool sections of the Ecuadorian Constitution that really give a lot of power to people and allow for things like that. Which means that if communities get organized and organized, they can really create the kind of structure they want, they're without a lot of outside influence. And I've seen examples of that all over the country, including in little towns in the province of Zamora, where they basically they have their own water system, they have their own sewer system, and the government keeps coming in and being like, hey, should we take this over and help you guys out? And they're like, no, we're good. And they just manage their own stuff and kind of handle their own business. And obviously, in the indigenous communities even more so.
Yeah. Right. And if they don't like something, they protest, and they usually get their way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is pretty powerful. I mean, people block the streets, you protest. A week later, it's like, okay, this law is not going to pass because people are protesting. And the indigenous are... they stick to their guns. Like
they really do.
Yeah.
No pun intended. There's hardly. Yeah. Okay, so that's Valladolid, Palanda. We cover.
Valladolid and Palanda are very similar.
Yeah.
I think Valladolid might be a little cooler, but very similar climate. I think same kind of things grow. Cacao. Actually, Palanda is apparently the birthplace of cacao.
Oh, really?
The fruit which chocolate is made out of. Yeah. That's what they say. They found these old ancient cacao mills and different things that the Incas or something like that used to. They say it's the birthplace of cacao, which is interesting. So they pride themselves with their cacao and coffee. That's something I like to do when I go down there. I go to the local coffee place and get some local Palanda Valladolid coffee, and try it out.
Ecuador is has some of the best coffee in the world. So in this region specifically, the Loja province, coffee grown in Loja province, which these towns are not in, but they're in the region, win awards all over the world every year for the quality of the coffee. Yeah, and I just jumping back to that sort of legends and myths thing. I don't know if it's probably has a different name, but like Chinguilamaca in that area.
Yeah.
There's which is close to here. Maybe 30 minutes or so. They found out in that area one of the skeletons that was like 3 meters, like 12 feet, like one of the giants.
Okay.
Totally confirmed. I've been out there, like all the people were telling me. It's like totally they just know, everyone knows,
Okay.
They also found a huge treasure out there, which actually a friend of mine was like an Ecuadorian friend of mine who lives out there was saying like, bring some of this, bring this, we'll go look for more. I almost did it just for fun, but I didn't end up doing it. But you always have this kind of stuff all over. Like, you're walking properties all the time now, and like the owner will always tell you, oh, well, there's probably gold, or they buried a treasure, or this cave they used to do X, Y, and Z, or this mountain is such and so, or that stuff here is just par for the course.
That's cool. Yeah, it's true. And the local people, it's not like, it's the local campesinos from the countryside, they love to like go and check out those places, like between Yangana, or between Vilcabamba and Valladolid, you go through the Continental Divide, you go up in the mountains pretty high. It's actually really cold up there. And there's an airplane that crashed up there. Do you know about it?
No.
You have to hike like an hour and a half to it. And I got these guys, they own the motorcycle shop here. It's what they do, A couple times a year, they like drive a motorcycle group and hike to the old airplane and like take pictures and make videos of, it's still there. Like the airplane's up in the mountains up there,
It'd be hard to get out.
Quebrada de los Muertos, I think it's called.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And another thing with these treasures and stuff, you got all these stories. Supposedly, when the Incan Empire was, when the Incan emperor was captured by the Spaniards, the Inca went and hid all the gold in the mountains, right? And apparently, the legend is there's 7, I think. There's 7 spots that they hid it, and one of them was found actually in Solanda, close to where.
That's probably what I'm talking about. That's probably the treasure that I'm talking about. Okay. I'm not sure, because those areas connect if you go high enough. So I wonder if it's that area. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways.
You know where Solanda is, right?
Yeah.
Santoro,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Cool. They actually found, maybe a couple hundred years ago, 150 years ago, like a huge amount of gold in the mountain there. And apparently the people who found it, they bought themselves the title of Marquis. Right? They became like Marquis de Solanda in Spain. They became like, royalty. So they just bought the title with all the gold they found. So, there's a lot of these stories. The locals think that, there's more gold to be found in various areas. So every time you check a property, there might be gold around here, They all think they got the gold somewhere, but they haven't.
And they might be right. I don't know. We've sold properties that between the agreement and closing date, the owners were out there with backhoes excavating. Like it was like their last chance to find the gold. That's happened more than once.
That's funny.
So then as you go further south, you get to Zumba. Zumba is in this region, it's my favorite area in the Orient. And the reason is that Zumba has the benefits, the pluses, the pros of the Orient, in the sense that there's no dry season, it's very fertile. In fact, it's much more fertile than a lot of areas in Zamora. It's very fertile, it's safe, people are great, it has all that stuff. It's a great climate. It's actually somewhat similar climate to Vilcabamba, slightly more humid, but not. Anyways, but it doesn't have a lot of the negatives. So it doesn't have the crazy humidity that almost the entire Orient has. It doesn't have the snakes and spiders that a lot of the Orient has. What else? It's pretty sunny, so it's not one of the. And a lot of the Orient can be sunny, but there's a lot of places in the Orient can be pretty cloudy, like a lot of the time. Kind of it rains a lot, cloud cover kind of rolls through a lot, and then you get sun, but you kind of can be cloudy like a decent chunk of the time. Zumba's sunny most of the time. It does rain a lot, but it's not. It'll rain really hard for like an hour or two. It's not an impressive amount of rain at all. It's very fertile. All of these areas, we haven't talked prices. All these areas are very cheap. So basically, the whole Orient is pretty inexpensive. Partly because it's not very populated. Partly because a lot of it's pretty humid, and so a lot of people don't necessarily want to live there because of the humidity. Right. But also it's just a massive, size with a low population. So
and typically the properties are large.
Right.
You don't have these small little, half a hectare or whatever. It's like these big, large properties. So of course it'll come out a lot cheaper per square meter, in these areas. Whereas here it's been kind of broken down. It's harder to find these larger properties in this area.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's about it. So Zumba's really beautiful. You can grow anything there. It's warm. It's just lovely. It's a place that I really like a lot. Look at that, 59 minutes, perfect. We're just hitting the hour mark. Anything to add before we wrap up?
No, that sounds good. We've covered it pretty much.
Awesome, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for checking out the channel. Oh, you know what? There's one thing I want to add. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but we get consistent sort of griping about prices on our YouTube channel and in other places. And I just want to reiterate, lots of Ecuador is really cheap. Vilcabamba and Malacatos and this little, that the few surrounding towns are not. So if you're interested in Vilcabamba and Malacatos, you got to pay what the market dictates. If you want cheap, rural, large Ecuador, we just talked about a whole bunch of these places. And so that totally exists. We don't set prices. We just operate within the marketplace. We do lots and lots of business with locals. We sell to locals all the time. They would not be paying prices that are not in line with local prices. And so, the prices are what they are. I don't hear anybody, complaining because a penthouse in Manhattan is worth $47 million. Prices are what they are. The market is what it is. It goes up, it goes down, it does its thing. But in this valley of Vilcabamba, in the valley of Malacatos, a little bit in Kinara, Yangana, although quite a bit less, these are sought after areas. Prices are high. It has nothing to do with foreigners. These are Lojanos, people from the city who want to live, who want to have second homes or rural properties in these areas, and the prices are what they are. Again, if you're looking for that rural Ecuadorian experience and you want, good price, cheap land, almost every other area we've talked about outside of those that I just mentioned today fit the bill. So I just want to mention that as well. Again, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. If you guys could give us a like, give us a comment, subscribe, share. Please get in touch with us. We'd love to help you. If you have questions about Ecuador or if you have questions about real estate, etc. And have a lovely day.